I never thought a Saturday afternoon at the public pool would change anything about my life, let alone introduce me to someone who'd make me rethink everything I thought I knew about love. Honestly, I went there just to cool off and maybe get a little exercise. I'm not exactly a pool regular or anything. I usually hit the gym or run outside. But it was scorching that day, and I figured, why not? The place was packed with kids splashing around, parents lounging with their towels, and the usual crowd of older folks chatting near the snack bar. The smell of chlorine mixed with sunscreen was so intense it felt like summer had officially taken over. I was just settling into the shallow end, my feet dangling in the water, when I noticed him. He wasn't in the water at all. In fact, he was sitting on the edge of the pool with his shoes off, legs crossed, just staring out at the water like he was somewhere else entirely. He had this calm, almost detached vibe, which immediately caught my attention because it was the opposite of everyone else's chaotic energy around us. He was wearing a simple white shirt that looked slightly damp, and his dark hair was slicked back, probably from some earlier swim or just from the heat. I remember thinking, what's a guy doing just sitting there like that at a public pool? Usually people jump in, splash around, mess with their phones, or yell to friends. But not him. He seemed quiet, almost like he was waiting for something or someone, but not in a desperate way. More like he had this quiet patience I didn't expect to see on a Saturday afternoon at a place like this. I tried to ignore him, but there was something about the way he watched the water that made me curious. He wasn't watching the swimmers or the kids playing. He was looking at the water like it held some kind of secret. Or maybe it reminded him of something. I won't lie, I probably stared a little too long, but then he caught me looking, and instead of being weird or awkward, he just smiled, a small, almost shy smile, and nodded like we were old friends, or maybe strangers who just got the memo that it was okay to acknowledge each other without saying much. That's when I realized I wanted to know more about him. Who was this guy who came to a public pool and didn't swim? Why was he there? What was going on behind that calm exterior? So I wandered a bit closer, trying to figure out a way to break the ice without sounding like a total weirdo. And that's when he said it first, not me. You're not from around here, are you? It was a simple question, but it hit me like a line in a movie, the kind of moment you don't expect but turns out to be the start of something way more interesting than a lazy afternoon dip. I looked at him, still sitting by the pool, this quiet stranger who somehow didn't fit the noisy scene around us, and I realized I was suddenly way more awake, more present than I had been all day. I nodded, and that's how it all started. But what happened next? Well, that's the part you might not be ready for yet. I nodded, and that's how it all started. But what happened next? Well, that's the part you might not be ready for yet. He smiled again, this time a little wider, like he was glad I answered honestly. I thought so, he said, patting the spot next to him on the pool's edge. You look like you don't belong here. I laughed, a little embarrassed. Fair. I just moved here a few weeks ago for work. Still figuring out the neighborhood and all that. He nodded thoughtfully. I get that. It's always weird at first. I've lived here my whole life, but sometimes I still feel like an outsider. That hit me in a way I wasn't expecting. Here was this guy, quiet and kind of mysterious, sitting at the edge of a public pool, telling me he sometimes felt like an outsider in his own hometown. I wasn't sure why, but it made me want to know more about him. What about you? You don't swim? I asked, nodding at his dry shirt and the fact that he wasn't jumping in like the rest of us. He shrugged, casting a glance at the water. I used to, a long time ago. But something happened, and I stopped. I guess I'm just here for the air and the feeling of being near water. It's calming. That sounded deeper than it should have for a simple public pool conversation, but I didn't push. Instead, I asked, what happened? He looked out at the water again, his brow furrowing just slightly. It's a long story. Maybe someday. I could tell it was something heavy, something he wasn't ready to share with just anyone, so I kept it light. Well, I'm good with long stories. And awkward new neighbor stories if you want to share. He chuckled softly. Thanks. Maybe you'll be the exception. We spent the next few minutes just sitting there, watching the chaos of the pool around us, the kids screaming when they cannonballed, the parents chatting, the lifeguard whistling every so often. It was loud and bright, but somehow, sitting next to him made it feel quieter, like a little bubble tucked away from the noise. After a while, I decided to take off my shirt and dip fully into the water. I glanced back at him. "You're really not coming in?" He shook his head. "Nah, I'll stay dry." I watched as he pulled his knees up and wrapped his arms around them, his gaze still distant. I wondered if he was thinking about something painful or just enjoying the quiet. I kicked off into the pool, trying to lose myself in the cool water, but I kept sneaking glances at him. There was something about his presence that was grounding, like he was both part of this place and somehow separate from it. Eventually, I swam over and perched myself on the edge next to him again, water dripping off me. "So what do you do when you're not contemplating the mysteries of the pool?" He smiled, this time a little less guarded. "I work at the bookstore down the street. It's not much, but it pays the bills. I like it though. Quiet, surrounded by stories." That made me smile back. A bookstore guy, figures. You seem like someone who'd appreciate a good story. He glanced at me, eyes sharp and curious. "What about you? What do you do?" "I'm in marketing. Corporate stuff mostly. Not nearly as poetic as books, but hey, it pays too." We fell into an easy rhythm after that, talking about everything and nothing. Favorite books, weird neighbors, the best late-night pizza spots in town. It felt surprisingly natural, like we'd known each other longer than a few minutes. At one point, a loud splash from a kid cannonballing too close startled me, and I looked up to see the guy blinking in the sunlight, a little smile playing on his lips. I realized it was the first time I'd seen him genuinely relaxed. I said, "I never would have guessed you come here just to watch. You've got this whole mysterious poolside philosopher vibe going on." He laughed, a soft, genuine sound that made my chest tighten in a way I hadn't expected. "I like that. Maybe I'll keep it." I found myself wanting to hear more, but also not wanting to rush it. There was something fragile about the way he carried himself, like he wasn't sure if he wanted to be known, or if that would break the spell. We sat there for what felt like hours, the sun slowly starting to dip, casting long shadows across the water. I realized I hadn't checked my phone once, hadn't thought about anything besides this strange, quiet guy who wasn't swimming and who had somehow pulled me into his world. As the lifeguard blew the whistle, signaling the pool was about to close, he stood up and dusted off his pants. "I should probably head out," he said, but then hesitated. "Hey, if you want, I could show you that bookstore sometime." "It's not far." I grinned, feeling a spark of something I wasn't ready to name. "I'd like that." He smiled again, warm, real, and for the first time I felt like maybe this unexpected Saturday at the pool was the first chapter of a story neither of us saw coming. We exchanged numbers, and as he walked away, still dry and calm, I understood that sometimes the most important things happen when you least expect them, in the quiet moments by the edge of a pool, with someone who isn't swimming but is willing to share a little space. I remember standing there, watching him walk away, the way his shirt clung lightly to his back despite not being wet. There was this quiet magnetism about him, something calm and unhurried in the way he moved, like he had all the time in the world and wasn't in any rush to get anywhere. It was the exact opposite of how I usually felt, always hustling, always thinking 5 steps ahead, always a little too wound up. I pulled my phone out and stared at the screen, the number still fresh, and then I did the dumb thing where I stared at it some more, like if I looked hard enough, I'd figure out exactly what I felt about this guy. I couldn't. It was all fuzziness and anticipation wrapped into one. That night, I texted him, something simple. "Hey, this is my name from the pool. Coffee at that bookstore soon?" The response came almost immediately. "Sounds good. Tomorrow afternoon?" And just like that, I had a date lined up with a guy the first met by a pool without him ever getting wet. The next day wasn't the typical first date kind of vibe. When I walked into the bookstore, it was exactly what he'd described. Cozy, the scent of old paper and coffee beans hitting me like a warm hug. He was behind the counter shelving some books, and when he looked up, His face lit up with this shy grin that made my stomach flip. "Hey," he said softly. "Glad you made it," I smiled back. "Wouldn't miss it." He led me to a small corner with a couple of armchairs, and we each grabbed a cup of coffee from the little cafe nook. The place was quiet, except for the soft hum of indie music playing somewhere in the background, and it felt like the world had slowed down just for us. We talked about the usual stuff: work, hobbies, movies we liked, but the conversation soon turned deeper. He told me more about himself, carefully at first, then with a little more openness as the afternoon wore on. He talked about growing up in the town, the bookstore being his little sanctuary, and how he loved the way stories could transport you somewhere else, even if just for a moment. When I asked about why he didn't swim anymore, there was a long pause. His eyes dropped to the coffee cup in his hands. "It was a few years ago," he said finally. "I was close with someone, and we used to come here a lot. He loved swimming. I tried to learn for him, but then he left. Just one day, without much explanation. I could tell this was hard for him to talk about, and I didn't want to push, but I also didn't want to let it hang there like some unfinished chapter. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "That sounds rough," he nodded. "Yeah, after that, the pool felt different, like it held too many memories. It's easier to just sit by the edge." I reached out and lightly touched his hand across the table. It was a small thing, but the look he gave me then, soft, tentative, like he wasn't sure if he should trust the feeling, made me want to hold on to it. "Thanks for sharing that with me," I said. "I'm glad you did." He smiled, this time with a hint of something vulnerable but hopeful. "Me too." Over the next few weeks, we kept meeting at the bookstore or sometimes just walking around town, coffee in hand, slowly peeling back the layers of each other's lives. He was quiet but thoughtful, always listening and occasionally surprising me with sharp wit or unexpected jokes that caught me off guard. One evening, we found ourselves back at the pool. Not to swim, of course, but just to sit on the edge like that first day. The sun was setting, painting the water with streaks of gold and pink. I asked him why he liked this place so much, even if he never got in. He sighed, smiling softly. "It's where I feel most connected to everything. The water, the memories, the people around. Even sitting here, I can feel things I don't usually let myself feel." I nodded, understanding more than I expected. We sat in silence for a while, the sounds of distant laughter and splashes fading into the background. Then, without thinking too much, I reached over and took his hand. His fingers curled around mine, warm and steady. "I'm really glad I met you," I said honestly. He looked at me, eyes shining in the fading light. "Me too." That night felt like the start of something real, not just a fling or a casual thing, but a genuine connection built from quiet moments and shared stories. I don't know where it'll go from here, but for the first time in a long time, I'm not rushing to find out. With him, I'm okay just sitting by the edge and seeing what happens. After that evening by the pool, things between us didn't exactly explode into some whirlwind romance, but that felt right. It was more like a slow burn, the kind of connection that sneaks up on you when you're not looking. We'd text throughout the week, sometimes about nothing at all, sometimes sharing bits of our days, and then meet up on the weekends. Those hangouts were always a mix of casual and meaningful, like going for coffee, browsing new arrivals at the bookstore, or walking around the quieter parts of town. No pressure, no grand declarations, just two people figuring out how to fit into each other's lives. One Saturday, about a month after we'd met, he invited me over to his apartment. I wasn't sure what to expect. He'd never really talked about where he lived or what his place was like. When I got there, it was this modest, sunlit space filled with books stacked everywhere, on shelves, on the floor, even on the windowsill. The smell of old paper mixed with the faint scent of lavender, something warm and calming. He was in the kitchen messing around with a recipe I didn't recognize. "Trying to make something edible," he joked when I walked in. I laughed. "Looks promising." He shrugged, a little self-conscious. "I don't cook much, usually just takeout or cereal." We settled in with glasses of wine he pulled from a small rack, and somehow the evening stretched longer than I thought it would. We talked about family, our weird childhood fears, favorite movies, all the stuff you share when you're starting to trust someone. At one point, he paused and looked down at his hands. Can I ask you something kind of personal? Shoot, do you believe people can just change, like the core of who they are? I thought about it for a second. I think so. It's not easy, but yeah, people grow. We're not stuck. He nodded slowly, eyes still on his hands. I want to believe that too. There was this quiet tension in the air, like he wanted to say more but wasn't sure if he should. That was something I was starting to notice about him. He carried some weight with him, some stories he wasn't quite ready to unpack. I reached out and squeezed his hand gently. You're not alone in wanting that. He looked up, and the look in his eyes was so raw it made my heart ache. Thanks. It means a lot. A few days later, we found ourselves back at the pool again. This time, it was late afternoon, and the place was quieter, the kind of calm that comes just before closing time. He sat on the edge as usual, but this time I could tell he was fighting something. After a few minutes, he finally said, I think I might try swimming again. I blinked, surprised. Really? What changed? He shrugged, eyes fixed on the water. I was thinking about that day, the day I stopped coming in. I realized I've been punishing myself, in a way. Maybe it's time to let go. I smiled, feeling a mix of pride and excitement. I'll be right here if you want company. He looked at me, and for once, his smile was full. No hesitation, no doubt. Okay, he said quietly. I watched as he slid off the edge and dipped into the water. The way the sunlight caught the droplets on his skin made me realize how much I was rooting for him in that moment. He swam slowly at first, like testing the waters, literally and figuratively. Then a little faster, until the hesitance melted away. When he finally climbed out, dripping but grinning, I couldn't help but laugh. You did it. He shrugged, cheeks flushed. Yeah, it feels different now. Better. As he toweled off, I realized this wasn't just about swimming. It was about healing, about reclaiming parts of himself he'd left behind. Over the next weeks, swimming became a part of our routine. Sometimes I joined him, sometimes I just sat on the edge and watched. We talked more openly now, about fears, hopes, the kind of vulnerability that only comes when you've built trust piece by piece. One night, after a late swim, we sat wrapped in towels, the air cooling around us. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything we'd shared and everything still unspoken. I'm really glad you let me in, I said. He smiled softly. Me too. You make it easier. Without thinking much, I leaned in, and he met me halfway. It wasn't flashy or dramatic, just two people finding comfort in a quiet kiss, the kind that promises there's more to come. That night, as we walked away from the pool, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what might happen. With him, I was ready to dive deep, and maybe, just maybe, find something real waiting beneath the surface. That kiss by the pool felt like the kind of moment you replay in your head long after it's over. The warmth of his lips, the softness in his eyes when we pulled away, and the quiet electricity humming between us. But it also came with this subtle shift, like something had changed, and yet everything stayed the same. We didn't rush anything after that night. No grand declarations or instant labels. Just a feeling that we were both stepping cautiously into something new, fragile, and promising. In the days that followed, our conversations deepened. One afternoon at the bookstore, while I was helping him rearrange some shelves, he paused and asked something that caught me off guard. Do you ever feel like you're carrying around pieces of your past that don't really belong to you anymore? Like you're holding on because it's familiar, even though it hurts? I was shelving a stack of poetry books but stopped and looked at him. Yeah, I think everyone does, in some way. It's like our brains are bad at letting go. He nodded, eyes serious. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. About what I'm still holding on to. I put down the books and leaned against the shelf, giving him my full attention. You don't have to carry it all by yourself. He gave me a small smile, but I could tell the weight was still there. A couple of weeks later, we planned a day trip to a nearby lake. It was one of those bright, cloudless days where the sun felt like it was just for you. I still remember how nervous he seemed when we got there. Like the idea of being near water, away from the controlled environment of the pool, was a big leap. We found a quiet spot on the shore, away from the weekend crowd. He sat on a blanket, watching the water ripple under the breeze. I could tell he was working up the courage to do something. Then he turned to me. "Want to see if I can swim out to that buoy?" I smiled, surprised but excited. "I'd love to." He slipped off his shoes and shirt, then took a deep breath before stepping into the water. The lake was cold, but he moved confidently, steady but cautious. I followed, swimming alongside him, matching his pace. It felt like we were moving through this unknown together. When he reached the buoy and touched it, his face broke into a grin that lit up his whole body. "I did it," I laughed. "Hell yeah, you did." As we swam back, I realized this moment wasn't just about swimming. It was about reclaiming a part of himself he'd buried, a part he'd thought was lost forever. Later that evening, back at his apartment, we sat on the floor surrounded by candles and scattered books. The air was warm with the scent of vanilla and musk, and the space felt saturated with a kind of quiet intimacy I hadn't known I needed. He looked at me, voice soft. "I'm scared sometimes that the past will catch up, or that I'll lose this, us." I reached for his hand, intertwining my fingers with his. "I can't promise it'll be easy, but I'm here. We're in this together." He squeezed my hand, eyes shining. "Thank you. That means everything." We leaned into each other, a slow dance of trust and connection, the outside world fading away. But of course, things aren't ever that simple. A few days after that night, I noticed he'd been quieter than usual. He wasn't texting as much, and when we did talk, there was this distance I hadn't seen before. One afternoon, I stopped by his place unexpectedly and found him sitting on the couch, staring at a photo on his phone. When he looked up, his eyes were rimmed red. "Hey," I said softly, sitting beside him. He swallowed hard. I ran into him. My heart skipped. The one from his past. The reason he'd stopped swimming for so long. "How did it go?" He shrugged, though I could tell it wasn't just a shrug. It messed with me more than I thought it would. "Old wounds, you know." I nodded, careful not to crowd him. "Want to talk about it?" He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Maybe soon. I'm still trying to figure out what I want to say." I reached over and brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "Whenever you're ready, I'm here." He leaned into my touch, and I knew this was just another step on the path we were walking. Uneven, uncertain, but ours. In the weeks that followed, we took it one day at a time. Some days were easy, walking hand in hand through the city, laughing over inside jokes, sharing stolen kisses in quiet corners. Other days, shadows from his past crept in, tests of patience and understanding. One evening, as we sat on his balcony watching the city lights, I asked, "Do you think you'll ever be ready to swim in the deep end again?" He looked thoughtful, then smiled. "Maybe, when I'm ready to stop running from what happened and start trusting what's ahead." I squeezed his hand, feeling lucky just to be by his side. "Then I'll be right here, in the water or on the edge, whatever you need." He rested his head on my shoulder, and in that quiet moment, I realized that sometimes love isn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It's about the mess, the healing, and the courage to keep showing up, even when it's hard. And honestly, I wouldn't want it any other way. It was one of those nights where everything feels both heavy and light at the same time. We were sprawled on his couch, a playlist humming softly in the background, half watching a movie neither of us was really paying attention to. He had this faraway look in his eyes, like his mind was wrestling with something just out of reach. I'd learned by now that when he got like that, it was best to tread lightly, let him come to me when he was ready. After a while, he shifted closer, resting his head on my shoulder, and I could feel the subtle tension in his body, the kind that doesn't quite go away with closeness alone. So I wrapped an arm around him and just held on. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" he asked quietly. I paused, thinking. I do. More than I used to, actually. Before, I was always too caught up in the next thing to really be present. With you, it feels different. Like maybe it's okay to slow down and not have everything figured out. He chuckled softly, a sound just for me. Yeah, me too. I'm scared, but in a good way. I smiled. Scared is okay. It means you care. He looked up at me, eyes searching. You make that sound easy, I shrugged. I'm not saying it is, but I'm willing to try, with you. He smiled, the kind of smile that reaches his eyes and makes the whole room feel warmer. I like the sound of that. Over the next few days, we slipped into a comfortable rhythm, texts in the morning, coffee dates in the afternoon, long walks in the evening. One Sunday, he surprised me with an invitation to join him at the pool again, not just sitting on the edge, but swimming together. I was excited, but also nervous. I knew this was a big deal for him, a step he hadn't taken lightly. When we got there, he lingered for a moment at the entrance, looking out at the water with that familiar mix of hesitation and resolve. I reached out, took his hand, and squeezed it gently. Ready? He swallowed and nodded. Yeah, let's do this. We changed into our swimsuits and stepped into the water slowly. At first, he stuck close to the shallow end, but as we swam side by side, I could see the tension ease from his shoulders. His strokes grew more confident, and before long, he was gliding through the water with a grace that made my chest tighten. After we climbed out, dripping and breathless, he laughed, a real, full laugh that lit up his face. That felt amazing. I forgot how good this could be. I smiled back, feeling proud and happy in a way I hadn't expected. See, sometimes jumping in is worth it. A few weeks later, things hit a new level when we spent a weekend together at a friend's cabin upstate. It was a cozy rustic place surrounded by trees and silence, a perfect escape from the city's noise. One evening, while we sat on the porch wrapped in blankets, the stars blazing overhead, he turned to me with that soft smile I'd come to adore. There's something I want to tell you, he said, voice a little shaky. I reached for his hand, steadying him. Whatever it is, I'm here. He took a deep breath, then looked me in the eyes. I think I'm ready to try again, to be with someone fully, not just pieces of myself, but all of me. My heart swelled. You already are, you know. You're here. He squeezed my hand. I needed to hear that. We stayed like that for a long time. The world reduced to just the two of us, the cool night air, the hum of crickets, and the quiet promise of something real unfolding. Back in the city after that weekend, things felt different. We talked about the future, not in a scary, pressure-filled way, but in a hopeful, tentative way. We made plans for more days together, introduced each other to friends, and slowly, carefully, started building a life that felt like it was ours. One rainy afternoon, as I helped him carry groceries into his apartment, he stopped and looked at me, eyes shining with something I couldn't quite name. Thank you, he said softly, for being patient with me, for believing. I pulled him into a hug, feeling the steady beat of his heart against mine. Always. Looking back now, I realized that meeting him at the pool wasn't just a chance encounter. It was the beginning of everything I didn't know I was missing. He taught me about quiet strength, about healing, and about the courage it takes to let someone in when you've been hurt before. And maybe the best part? We didn't need grand gestures or perfect moments. Just a pool, some shared silences, and the slow, steady unfolding of something real. I don't know where we'll be a year from now, or 5, but I do know this. I'm willing to find out. With him, hand in hand, ready to dive in. Some nights when I lie awake, I think back to that first day at the pool, the way he just sat there, not swimming, watching the water like it held some secret. It's wild to think how far we've come from that quiet moment. We've had our share of ups and downs, moments when the past felt too heavy, and times when the future seemed uncertain. But through it all, we kept showing up for each other, little by little building a connection that feels honest and real. A couple of weeks ago, we went back to that same public pool. It was late afternoon, just like before, but this time there was no hesitation. He slipped into the water with a confident smile, and I joined without a second thought. We swam side by side, laughing easily, the water warm around us. When we climbed out, dripping and breathless, he pulled me close and kissed me, soft and slow, like a promise. Later, as we dried off, he caught my hand and said, "Thank you for being patient with me, for helping me find my way back." I smiled and squeezed his hand. "No thanks needed. You did the hard part." That moment felt like everything coming full circle. The quiet guy who once sat on the edge, unsure if he'd swim again, now choosing to dive in, with me right there beside him. We're not perfect, and life still throws challenges our way, but we've learned that real connection isn't about avoiding the hard stuff. It's about being willing to face it together. And honestly, that makes all the difference. So yeah, I met him at a public pool. He wasn't swimming then. But now, he's not just swimming. He's living, loving, and finally letting himself be fully seen. And I feel lucky every single day that I get to be part of that.